Chief Douglas was a man everyone in the city respected. He was one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country, owning a chain of companies that employed thousands of people. But wealth and respect could not hide the pain he carried inside his heart. Years ago, he lost his wife in a tragic car accident. The memory haunted him every day, and though he put on a brave face for the world, his nights were full of emptiness. His only comfort was his daughter, Stacy, who had grown into a bright and kind young woman. Stacy had just returned home from her university break. That evening, after visiting some friends, she was walking home when the sky suddenly grew dark. Clouds gathered quickly, and heavy rain poured down. She had no umbrella. Cars splashed water on the road, and her clothes were getting soaked. That was when a gentle-looking woman stopped her. She carried a small umbrella and a handbag. She smiled warmly and said, "My dear, you will catch a cold like this. Come walk with me." Stacy hesitated, but there was something motherly about the woman. Her voice was soft, like the kind of voice Stacy always imagined her late mother might have had. She agreed and walked beside the woman under the umbrella. The woman introduced herself as Madam K. She lived not far from Stacy's neighborhood and sold fabrics at the city market. The two walked and talked as though they had known each other forever. When Stacy finally reached home, she hugged Madam K and thanked her for her kindness. Something in her heart told her she needed to see this woman again. When she entered the house, Chief Douglas was sitting in the living room, reading the newspaper. He looked up and saw Stacy smiling in a way he hadn't seen in a long time. "Daddy, you won't believe who I met today," Stacy said excitedly. "A woman so kind, so gentle. She feels like family. I want you to meet her." Chief Douglas was curious. It was unusual for Stacy to speak so highly of anyone. The next day, Madam K came to visit. When she stepped into the house, something strange happened. Chief Douglas froze. His hands shook. His heart raced. He stared at Madam K as though he had seen a ghost. She looked exactly like his late wife. His late wife, who had died years ago in a car accident. But it couldn't be her. That was impossible. She was buried. He had mourned her. Still, he couldn't look away. Madam K greeted him respectfully, but she seemed not to notice his shock. She didn't recognize him at all. She only smiled and said kind words, like she had known the family for years. From that moment, Chief Douglas was restless. He carried an old photograph of his late wife in his wallet. That night, he looked at the photo over and over again, comparing it to Madam K's face. They were the same woman. Same eyes. Smile. Same beauty mark near the lips. He couldn't sleep. His heart told him something was hidden. Something fate had brought back to his door. Weeks passed. Stacy continued to bring Madam K around. Chief Douglas, unable to resist his growing feelings, made a decision that shocked even him. He asked Madam K to marry him. He told himself it was because she reminded him of his late wife. But deep down his heart whispered, "This is her. She is alive." And so, Chief Douglas married Madam K in a quiet but beautiful ceremony. What none of them knew was that fate was about to reveal the greatest secret of their lives. Because Madam K was not just a stranger, she was the very woman they thought had died. She was Stacy's mother. And soon, the truth would come crashing into their lives through the most unexpected way. Photographs carried in their wallets and handbags. Life seemed to settle into a rhythm after the wedding. Madam K had now become Mrs. Douglas, a role she handled with grace and warmth. She cooked meals for Chief Douglas and Stacy, decorated the house with fresh flowers, and filled the halls with laughter. For the first time in many years, Chief Douglas felt alive again. Stacy, too, glowed with happiness. She loved having Madam K around, as though she had gained both a stepmother and a close friend at once. Yet, behind the happiness, an invisible thread of mystery wove itself into their lives. It all began one quiet afternoon when Chief Douglas was in his office. He had opened his wallet to take out his business card when a small, old photograph slipped out and fell to the floor. He picked it up slowly, staring at it with misty eyes. The photograph was of his late wife, smiling at him during their honeymoon many years ago. She wore a simple white dress, and her hair was tied in a bun. Chief Douglas placed it back into his wallet, sighing deeply. "If only you were here," he whispered. Later that evening, while Madame K was unpacking some items in her handbag, she froze. At the bottom of her bag was a folded photograph she had never seen before. She picked it up carefully. It was old, faded, but clear enough. The woman in the photo looked exactly like her. Same face, same smile, same eyes. But she had no memory of ever taking that photo. Madame K frowned. How did this get into my bag?" she whispered to herself. A strange heaviness filled her chest. For years, she had carried a blank space in her memory. She knew she had lived in a man's house once, a kind old herbalist who had saved her when she was near death. He had told her she had been in an accident, and he had found her unconscious by the roadside. When she recovered, she could not remember her past. She only knew her name was K, a fragment she could recall. Madame K shook her head, put the photo back, and tried to ignore it. But the image haunted her. Meanwhile, Stacy was having her own strange experience. One morning before class, she reached into her handbag for a pen. Instead, her fingers brushed against something stiff. Another photograph. She pulled it out, confused. Her heart stopped. It was a picture of her as a baby, cradled in the arms of a woman. The woman's face was the same as Madame K's. Her hands shook. She stared at the picture again and again. How was this possible? The only picture she had ever known of her mother had been buried with her years ago. She had grown up believing her mother was gone forever. Yet here was Madame K, holding her as a baby. That evening at dinner, silence filled the dining room. Chief Douglas looked distracted, his mind still on the photo in his wallet. Madame K forced a smile, but her hands trembled as she served the soup. Stacy barely touched her food, the photograph burning in her pocket like a secret she was afraid to share. Finally, Stacy broke the silence. "Daddy," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" Chief Douglas looked up. "Yes, my dear. If Mom were alive, what do you think she would look like now?" Stacy's voice cracked a little. Chief Douglas's spoon fell into his bowl. His eyes darkened with memories. He cleared his throat. "She would look like Madame K," he said, almost to himself. Madame K froze, staring at him. The words hit her like lightning. She swallowed hard, then reached for her handbag. Slowly, she pulled out the photograph she had found earlier. "I need to ask, who is this woman?" she said, placing the picture on the table. Stacy gasped. "That's the same woman in my photo," she cried, pulling hers out too and placing it beside Madame K's. Chief Douglas's hand trembled. He reached into his wallet and laid down his own photograph next to theirs. 3 photographs, 3 different moments, yet the same woman appeared in all. The room fell silent. The air grew heavy. No one could move. Chief Douglas stared at Madame K with tears in his eyes. "Tell me the truth," he whispered. "Who are you?" Madame K's eyes blurred with tears. I don't know. I don't remember. But all my life I have felt something missing. A part of me I could not explain." Stacy began to cry. "But this is you, Madame K. You were holding me as a baby. You are my mother, aren't you?" Madame K clutched her chest. Her head spun. Flashes of memory began to return. Screeching tires, broken glass, blood, voices shouting, then darkness. Then the old herbalist's face leaning over her, feeding her bitter African herbs. Days of pain, weeks of silence, and then nothing. The memories rushed back in fragments, and she cried out, covering her face. "Yes, I remember now. I was in an accident. I thought I died, but I lived. I forgot everything. I didn't know who I was." Chief Douglas rose from his chair, his face pale but filled with hope. "It's you. You're my wife. You never died. You came back to me." Tears rolled down Stacy's cheeks as she whispered, "Mama." The three of them embraced, crying and laughing all at once. It was the miracle they never expected. The photographs had spoken the truth. But while their reunion filled their hearts with joy, none of them knew that not everyone would accept this truth. For when fate gives, it also tests. And soon, shadows of doubt, jealousy, and danger would creep into their new beginning. The night the truth came out, none of them could sleep. The photographs lay on the table, silent witnesses to a past thought buried in the grave. Madam K sat on the bed, trembling, while Chief Douglas paced the room, still in shock. Stacy lay on the couch in tears, whispering to herself, "Mama, you came back." For Madam K, fragments of memory began returning like shattered glass being pieced together. First it hurt. Her head throbbed. Images flashed, roads, headlights, screeching tires. Sudden crash. Blood. Her voice screaming, then darkness. Then another memory. The smell of smoke and herbs. A man's wrinkled face bending over her. Thatched roof above. The taste of something bitter forced into her mouth. Pain in her bones. She wanted to die, but the man's voice kept calling her back. That man. Yes, the herbalist. His name came back faintly, Baba Chaik. He was known in his village as a healer, a man who used African herbs and roots to treat wounds that hospitals sometimes could not. "Douglas," Madam K whispered, holding her husband's arm. "I remember now. After the accident, someone pulled me from the wreckage. An old man. He took me into his hut. He treated me with herbs. He saved me." Chief Douglas's eyes widened. "You mean, all these years you were alive, living somewhere?" Madam K nodded, tears falling. "Yes, but I didn't remember who I was. The accident, it wiped my memory. I didn't even know my name. The old man called me K, because it was the only sound I could say when he asked me. That is how I became Madam K." Stacy sat up quickly, her eyes swollen from crying. "Mama, why didn't you try to find us? Why didn't you come home?" Madam K's heart broke at her daughter's question. She knelt before Stacy and held her hands tightly. "My child, I didn't know I had a home. I didn't know I had a husband or a daughter. I only remembered pain, and then the herbalist's hut. After months of treatment I got better. But when I looked in the mirror, I couldn't even recognize myself. I left his home and came to the city. I started a new life. I worked in the market. I thought I was just an ordinary woman." Chief Douglas's voice cracked with emotion. "All this time I thought you were dead. I buried an empty coffin. I mourned you for years. And you were alive, forgotten, hidden by fate." The room grew quiet. The truth was heavy, but it also brought light. Fate had written a painful story, yet destiny had brought them together again. The next morning, Chief Douglas made a decision. "We must find the herbalist. The man who saved you deserves to be thanked. He is part of our story now." Madam K nodded. "Yes, Puchai. He lived in a village outside the city. I remember the footpath, the sound of a river nearby. I think I can find it." And so, a week later, the three of them set out on a journey. Chief Douglas's driver took them through dusty roads, across narrow bridges, and into the heart of the countryside. Stacy leaned against her mother's shoulder, still amazed she could use the word mother again. Finally, they reached a small village surrounded by tall trees. Madam K's eyes lit up with recognition. "Yes, this is it. The smell, the trees, the sound of that river. This is the place." An old man sat outside a mud hut, pounding herbs in a wooden mortar. His hair was white, his back bent, but his eyes were sharp. When he saw Madam K, his mouth opened in surprise. "My daughter, you came back." Tears filled Madam K's eyes as she ran to him. She knelt and held his hands. "Baba Chaik, you saved my life. Because of you, I am here today." The old man smiled, his teeth few but bright. "Ah, God is good. I wondered if you would ever remember. You were like a dead woman when I found you by the road. The accident was terrible. Carried you myself. I told everyone you were not meant to die that night. And see, here you are." Chief Douglas bowed respectfully. "Sir, you do not know what you have done for me and my daughter. You gave me back my wife. You gave Stacy back her mother. I owe you more than I can ever repay." The herbalist waved his hand. "No man owes me. I only did what God asked me to do. She was placed on my path, and I could not leave her to die. The rest was destiny." The reunion was emotional. Stacy hugged the old man, thanking him with tears. Madam K wept like a child, overwhelmed by the love and faith that had carried her through so many years of darkness into the arms of her family once again. But even as they rejoiced, a shadow lingered in Chief Douglas's heart. He knew that the world would not accept such a story easily. A woman believed to be dead, suddenly alive, with no memories until now. Whispers would rise. Enemies in business would use it against him. Some might even claim she was an imposter. And in his company boardroom, rivals already waited for a weakness to bring him down. The truth had reunited his family, but it also threatened the empire he had built. Would fate's gift also become fate's test? News travels fast in the city, especially when it concerns a man as wealthy and powerful as Chief Douglas. His sudden marriage to Madam K had already been the talk of the town, but when old friends, colleagues, and rivals noticed how much she resembled his late wife, the whispers grew louder. Some said Chief Douglas had married a look-alike to replace his dead wife. Others claimed the woman was an imposter, a gold digger who had bewitched him. A few even suggested that Chief Douglas was losing his mind. At first, Chief Douglas ignored the rumors. He was too happy to have his wife and daughter together again. But soon, the whispers began to creep into his business world. One morning, he walked into a board meeting at his company headquarters. The long table was filled with directors and shareholders, all staring at him with curious eyes. Mr. Okafor, one of his senior directors and longtime rival, leaned forward. "Chief," he began smoothly, "we have heard unusual stories. They say your late wife has returned, that she is alive, living in your house again. Is this true?" The room fell silent. Chief Douglas tightened his grip on his pen. He looked around at the skeptical faces. "Yes," he said firmly. "It is true. My wife did not die as we thought. She survived, though she lost her memory. A good man saved her life. Fate has reunited us." Mr. Okafor raised an eyebrow. "Chief, with all due respect, such stories are unbelievable. How can a woman everyone buried suddenly be alive? Do we have proof she is the same woman? Forgive me, but the company's reputation is at stake." Another director nodded. "People are already talking, Chief. They say you have been tricked. We must be careful." Chief Douglas's face hardened. "Gentlemen, let me remind you that this company was built on my sweat and vision. My family's private life is not up for debate. Madam K is my wife. End of discussion." But though his words silenced the boardroom, the seed of doubt had been planted. At home, the storm was brewing too. Stacy overheard whispers from some of her friends. One evening, her best friend Anita confronted her. "Stacy, are you sure this Madam K is really your mother? I mean, people say she just appeared out of nowhere. What if she's pretending?" Stacy's eyes flashed. "Don't say that. She is my mother. We have the photographs, Anita. We have proof." But even as she spoke, doubt tugged at her heart. The world's skepticism was beginning to poison her peace. Meanwhile, Madam K struggled with her own fears. She walked through the Douglas mansion with unease. Servants whispered behind her back. Some bowed, but others exchanged suspicious glances. She knew the world didn't believe her story. She sometimes didn't even believe it herself. Late at night, she sat by the window, looking at the city lights. "God," she prayed softly, "why did you bring me back only to face this shame? I don't even remember everything. What if they are right? What if I am not the woman they think I am?" Chief Douglas, seeing her tears, knelt beside her and held her hand. "Don't doubt, my love. I know you are my wife. My heart has never lied to me. Fate would not play such a cruel trick." But fate was not finished testing them. The newspapers soon picked up the story. Bold headlines splashed across the front pages. CEO Mary's wife thought dead. Mystery woman in Douglas mansion. Who is Madam K? Reporters camped outside their gate. Paparazzi followed Stacy to her university. Business partners called Chief Douglas, asking if he was in his right mind. Then came the biggest blow. One afternoon, a legal notice arrived. It was from a group of shareholders demanding that Chief Douglas submit Madam K for a DNA test to prove she was who she claimed to be. The letter was harsh. Failure to do so may result in a vote to remove you as CEO, as your personal decisions have begun to endanger the company's reputation and stability. Chief Douglas's hands shook with rage as he read it. "How dare they?" he roared. "This is my wife, my family. They have no right." But Madam K placed a trembling hand on his arm. "Douglas, maybe they do. Maybe this is the only way to silence the doubts. If a test will prove I am who I am, then let them take it." Stacy, overhearing, cried out, "No, Mama, you don't need to prove anything. We already know the truth. Why should strangers question our family?" But Chief Douglas looked at his wife's determined eyes. He knew she was right. Sometimes to end whispers you had to face them head-on. That night, as the family sat together, Madam K spoke softly. "If this is what it takes, I will do it. For us, for our peace. Let them test my blood, my bones, anything they want. The truth will stand." Chief Douglas clenched his fists. "So be it. We will give them proof. And when they see it, they will regret ever doubting." The storm outside grew fiercer. Reporters shouted from the gates. Enemies sharpened their knives. But inside, the family held each other, preparing for the battle that lay ahead. The pressure was unbearable. For days, reporters swarmed around the Douglas mansion like flies around honey. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved at the gate, voices shouting questions every time the family car pulled out. "Madam K, are you really the late Mrs. Douglas? Chief, are you being deceived by an imposter? Stacy, is this woman truly your mother?" The mansion walls felt like a prison. Inside, Madam K paced the hallways, her nerves fraying with every hour. Chief Douglas was restless, his temper flaring at the smallest thing. Stacy was torn between anger and fear. Finally, the date was fixed. The DNA test would be done at a government hospital, with trusted doctors and observers present. The news spread across the country like wildfire. Television stations announced it as if it were a court trial. The world wanted to know, was Madam K truly the woman thought dead, or a stranger with a stolen face? That morning, silence filled the Douglas mansion. Madam K dressed simply, in a white blouse and long skirt. Her hands trembled as she buttoned it. Stacy helped her, whispering, "Mama, don't be afraid. The truth will fight for you." Chief Douglas walked into the room, wearing his suit but looking more like a man preparing for battle than business. He kissed his wife's forehead gently. "No matter what happens today, know this, I believe in you. Even if the whole world doubts, my heart does not." Tears filled Madam K's eyes. "Thank you, Douglas. You carried my absence all these years. Today, I pray the truth will carry us all." They left the mansion together, hands linked like a family facing judgment. Outside, reporters screamed their names, cameras flashing non-stop. Security guards pushed the crowd back as their black SUV rolled away. The hospital was buzzing. Doctors in white coats waited in a special room, along with legal officials, journalists, and company representatives. Mr. Okafor, Chief Douglas's rival, was there too, a smug smile on his face. "Chief," he said mockingly, "today we will know the truth. If this woman is truly your wife, I will bow. But if not, your empire will crumble under the shame." Chief Douglas ignored him, squeezing Madam K's hand instead. Stacy stood protectively by her mother, glaring at the doubters. The process was explained carefully. First, Madam K's DNA would be compared to Stacy's to confirm if she was indeed her biological mother. Then, a cross-check with preserved medical records from years back would seal the matter. The doctors brought out sterile swabs. Madam K sat first, her heart racing as they gently swabbed her cheek. Then Stacy sat, trying to look brave though her hands shook. Finally, the samples were sealed in labeled envelopes. "We will now run the tests," the chief doctor announced. "The results will be available within a few hours." The waiting began. Those hours felt like years. The family sat together in a private waiting room. Madam K prayed silently, clutching the photographs that had first revealed the truth. Stacy leaned against her shoulder, whispering, "Mama, I don't care what they say. I know you are mine." Chief Douglas sat stiffly, his fists clenched. He knew the truth in his heart, but fear gnawed at him. What if the accident had twisted fate so badly that even science could not recognize it? Outside, the crowd of journalists grew restless. The world wanted a verdict. At last, the door opened. The chief doctor walked in, holding a file. The room went dead silent. Even Mr. Okafor, usually loud, held his breath. The doctor cleared his throat. "We have concluded the DNA analysis. The results are clear and undeniable." He looked at Madam K, then at Stacy. "This woman is indeed the biological mother of Miss Stacy Douglas." Gasps filled the room. Some cheered, others murmured in shock. The doctor continued, "The match percentage is 99.9%. There is no doubt. Madam K is the same woman who gave birth to Stacy. She is your wife, Chief Douglas." Tears burst from Stacy's eyes as she threw herself into her mother's arms. "I knew it. Mama, I knew it." Chief Douglas stood slowly, his face wet with tears, and embraced them both. His voice cracked with emotion. "The world doubted us, but blood has spoken. You are mine. My wife, my love, my life." Madam K sobbed into his chest. "Douglas, I am home at last. No more shadows. No more doubts." But even in the midst of their joy, the bitterness of some remained. Mr. Okafor sneered, though his face had lost its color. "So be it. Blood may speak, but the world will still talk. This revelation does not erase the scandal you have brought upon your company." Chief Douglas turned to him, his voice like thunder. "Scandal? No, Okafor. This is not scandal, it is miracle. Fate buried my wife, but destiny brought her back. And now, no man can separate what God has joined again." The room erupted into noise. Reporters rushing out to spread the breaking news, cameras flashing again and again. But for the Douglas family, the noise didn't matter. The truth had finally set them free. That evening, back at the mansion, peace returned like a gentle rain. Madam K stood in the garden, the cool wind brushing her face. Stacy played with her mother's hair like a child, laughing through her tears. Chief Douglas watched them with a heart overflowing. For years he had carried a hole in his life, a wound no wealth could heal. Now at last the wound was closing. But even as they celebrated, Madam K knew the journey wasn't over. Being alive again meant facing all the expectations of her role. Wife of a CEO, mother of a grown daughter, woman under the public eye. The storm outside had calmed, but storms inside hearts still lingered. For destiny had given them back what they lost. Yet destiny also demanded strength to keep it. And soon they would face one final test that would shake not just their family, but everything they thought they knew about love, loss, and second chances. The living room was silent, too silent. The weight of years of pain, loss, and unanswered questions seemed to press down on every wall of the mansion. Chief Douglas sat on one end of the sofa, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes red from tears. Stacy sat across from him, her face pale but determined. And between them sat Madam K, her heart pounding as though it would burst through her chest. For the first time, all three of them had laid the same photograph on the table. 3 different copies, worn out in 3 different ways, but carrying the same face. The same smile. The same truth. Madam K touched the picture with trembling fingers. Why do we all have the same photograph?" she asked in a whisper. Her voice cracked, her eyes darting from Chief Douglas to Stacy. "Because," Chief Douglas said softly, "that woman in the photo is you." Madam K blinked rapidly. She gave a nervous laugh, shaking her head. "No, it can't be. She's dead. She died in a car accident, didn't she?" "That's what you said." "I thought you died," Chief Douglas said, his voice breaking. "I buried an empty coffin. I mourned you for years. I raised Stacy alone. But here you are alive. You are my wife, my one and only love. You are her mother." The room spun around Madam K. Her breath came in short gasps as her mind fought against the truth. But then, like lightning flashing across a stormy sky, memories came rushing back. The sound of screeching tires. The blinding light of a truck. Her body thrown across the road. A man's strong arms lifting her up, carrying her away. The smell of herbs, the chance of a healer. Waking up in a strange hut, with no memory of who she was. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "It's true. Oh my God, it's true," she whispered. Stacy jumped up, her heart bursting with hope. Mama, it's you. I knew it. I felt it all along. Mama, I missed you every day of my life." She ran into her mother's arms, hugging her so tightly it was as if she would never let go again. Madam K sobbed uncontrollably, clutching Stacy. "My baby, my child. I thought I lost you forever. I thought I lost everything." Chief Douglas watched them, tears rolling freely. Slowly, he moved closer and wrapped his arms around both of them. For the first time in years, the family was whole again. The storm that had scattered them had finally passed. But the road ahead would not be easy. Madam K had lived a different life for years, with no memory of who she was. Chief Douglas had built his world around grief and survival. Stacy had grown up motherless, believing half her soul was missing. Now they had to learn how to live as a family again. Weeks passed, and Madam K worked hard to remember everything. Sometimes she would sit in the garden with Stacy, and old lullabies would come to her lips. Sometimes she would watch Chief Douglas read his newspapers, and a flash of memory would remind her of evenings long ago. Piece by piece, her life returned to her. But not all memories were pleasant. She remembered the pain of the accident, the loneliness of waking up without knowing her own name, the struggles of building a life in the city as Madam K, without the faintest clue that she was once a wife and a mother. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Madam K spoke with a trembling voice. "I don't know how to thank God for this second chance. He took me through death's shadow but brought me back to where I belong. I only ask for your patience, to let me learn to be your wife again, and your mother again." Chief Douglas reached across the table and held her hand. "My dear, I waited for you even when I thought you were gone. I'll wait for you again now. Take all the time you need. What matters is that you are here." Stacy smiled through her tears. "We'll learn together, Mama. We'll heal together." The family bowed their heads and prayed that night, thanking God for the miracle of reunion. And though the scars of the past remained, the house was filled with a new light. Laughter returned to its halls. Songs replaced silence. And photographs, those once painful reminders, now became treasured symbols of God's mysterious ways. Chief Douglas no longer kept the photo hidden in his wallet. Instead, he placed it in a frame on the wall, beside a new photograph of the family together. Stacy no longer wept when she held her mother's face in her hands, because now she could touch her, embrace her, hear her voice. And Madam K no longer carried her old photograph in secret. She now carried her family openly, proudly, gratefully. The story of their brokenness became the testimony of their healing. Destiny had taken them apart, but love had brought them home. This story reminds us that love, faith, and destiny can rewrite even the darkest chapters of our lives. No matter how broken the past may seem, healing and reunion are always possible. If this story touched your heart, Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of love, family, and second chances.